So changes could be made to exams in 2022 and thereafter to take into account the disruption faced by pupils because of the pandemic.
Yes, the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson told MPs he wants to see students sitting their GCSEs and A-levels next year, but warned there would be changes to ensure fairness.
Very much expect there to be sort of adjustments and mitigations to be put in place, because I think that, you know, those youngsters who currently are in year 10 and year 12 will have obviously suffered a disruption as a result of the pandemic. So I think that you don't have the situation of immediately switching back to, you know, the absolute sort of same state of situation as it was back in 2019.
Adjustments and mitigations. Well, with so much uncertainty, should we just scrap next year's exams now? Joining us is the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, Jeff Barton, and also founder of the Oasis Charitable Trust, Steve Chalk. You run a number of schools, Steve Chalk, and you think, let's get rid of them now.
Well, I think that this uncertainty, for a start, Susanna, is no good. This is the third year we'll be facing uncertainty. There could be changes. What we need is certainty now. I think what we need is a winter COVID-proof plan, a guaranteed plan, so that at the beginning of September, by the beginning of September, before the beginning of September, every child, every mum, every dad and every teacher knows what they're doing in a guaranteed way through the course. But what we've got to remember is that fairness isn't a return to where we were before the pandemic. The pandemic has given us a chance to see things in a new way. It was just on Monday, you'll remember, that Josh McAllister was presenting some of the findings of the independent care review. And in that, he said the evidence shows that the education system, not schools, the system is failing the poorest children. So there's no fairness. Just last month, Kevin Collins resigned because he said we needed £15 billion to provide the stability and the support that the poorest kids who've suffered most through the pandemic need. And that wasn't listened to. He resigned, of course. So the system is not fair. If you were running a factory and off the, to make teapots, and off the end of the conveyor belt, the production line, 3 out of 10 teapots came there broken, cracked on the floor, you'd stop the production line and you'd rethink. The truth is, for years and years and years, even before the pandemic, 3 out of 10 children leaving our education system felt that they were failing.
Okay.
So the exam system needs rethinking altogether.
Yeah, let's go to Jeff Barton on that then. Jeff, my son Sam has just finished his GCSE year, although there were no GCSEs. However, for the first couple of months of the September term and then into the start of January, no one really knew what the government was going to do. There was some suggestion there might be exams, there was some suggestion there might be some sort of test along the way, and then eventually in the new year, as that unfolded and that unrolled, the plans became clearer. It was so difficult for Sam, his classmates and everybody in the year to try and understand what they were going to be facing. It was difficult for the school to try and maintain the kids' focus, to try and maintain their work and trying to keep the parents up to date. One of the points that Steve's making, if they make that decision now, it will offer a bit of certainty to the parents and the pupils so they have an understanding of what the next school year is going to look like. And that is going to be in everybody's interest, surely.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Ben and Susanna. We can't carry on like this. And like Steve, like everybody, we all crave a kind of certainty. The trouble is that young people have been brought up through our education system being told that exams are really important. So the question is, do you get rid of exams and does that give you the certainty that Steve talks about? Or do you say, look, exams will go ahead next year, but they will look different. So the average GCSE student, your Sam, for example, would in normal times have been sitting something like 27, 28, 29 separate papers. That seems to me madness. Well, what if you were to say there will be a reduced number of papers? Or what if you were to say the papers won't look the same, they will cover the topics that have been announced in September, so your teacher has the certainty and you have the certainty that you will be asked questions in history on the Tudors, but you won't be asked questions on the Stuarts or whatever it might be. That seems to me would give a sense of certainty, and significantly for your Sam, would allow you a feeling that next summer you will have the chance to show you have earned your grade against an examiner. Reduced papers, reduced content, but nevertheless that sense that your destiny has not been defined by an algorithm. You've been able to demonstrate in part, alongside your teacher assessment, here's what I can achieve.
Yeah. Steve Chalk, I wonder whether assessments are fair because, you know, some pupils don't get on with their teachers. Some pupils have had barely any contact with their teachers. The disruption of lockdown has meant that, you know, that in itself might be considered an inherently unfair system. And where there has been more contact, for instance, in the private sector, you might consider assessment, you know, would not be as fair as in, or more fair or less fair than in the state sector. There's a division between the two types of schools and types of teacher assessment.
Yeah, no, Susanna, it's a really fair point, isn't it? It's not a one-size-fits-all system, though, is it? And we know, I mean, just this evidence of this giant report that no doubt you were reporting on Monday says we are failing the poorest children, the most disadvantaged children. All of the evidence that we've heard through the pandemic tells us that it's those kids without the space, without the great broadband connection, without the opportunity for a parent to be there. You know, when we talk about national lockdown, we've not had national lockdowns. That's a middle-class term. The poorest have been shoved onto the front line. See, poor parents, economically poor, haven't had the opportunity to be with their children. So we just need a fair system. I agree with Jeff. It may include some element of exams, but it's got to include individual assessment. Teacher-assessed individual assessment. Teachers do care about their kids, Susanna. They really do. And, of course, we did coursework assessment, work actually done, an individual assessment until the last few years. It's not a new idea. We've done it before. We know it works. But there needs to be a mixed menu.
I think, Jeff, you're the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. What are the people that you're leading, that are part of your association, what's the overwhelming feeling from them? Are they all for a sort of the Department of Education stepping up now and saying what you're suggesting, sort of a much more reduced syllabus and an exam at the end is what we want? Or are they thinking, as Steve's suggesting, just continuous assessment across the year? Because I think what happened to Sam in the end, and I know that Susanna's Finn will potentially his A-levels, he did GCSEs last year.
For next year, I've got a GCSE student, I've got an A-level student, but this year has been so disrupted. And of course, my eldest son was in the algorithm year.
Well. So that's not, and Kate's got Darcy's doing GCSEs. So we're all there. And actually, Sam ended up having so many assessments across the year. It was extraordinary. From January through till May or June, he didn't stop being assessed in all his exams because the school wanted to have a fair representation of what it was that the grade he should get, which we still don't know, obviously, and we'll find out in August. What's the feeling coming back from your members?
Well, I think there's a couple of points in response to that, Ben. First of all, a general point is we need to have some clarity about what schools and colleges may look like. We cannot continue, because one child tests positive, to send home the other 249. We simply have to get away from that sense that young people are going to have the collateral damage of missing out on education. The second point is, in terms of assessment, we are in a better place now, aren't we? Because when we had the announcement from the Prime Minister that exams were going to be scrapped, and then Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State, said there is a plan B, there wasn't a plan B. We had to wait 4 months until we actually knew what the assessment was. So at least what we're getting today is a sense that things will not be business as usual next year. Now, Steve is right. Our education system needs reform. That's a long-term plan. Yeah. Around exams, though, I think your young people would be reassured if they knew that their teachers were able to say to them, here's the stuff you will be tested on in an exam. Here's the stuff we will be assessing you on during the autumn term. Here's how we will assess you. And I think that will be a motivation for those young people to feel they're not going to be the victims in all of this in the way that this year and last year, too often, they have felt that they were forgotten.
Yeah. Steve Chalk, you run 52 schools, the Oasis Trust. How have your Year 10s, Year 12s been getting on this year? I mean, we know across the state sector in particular, for instance, something simple like access to, as you said, broadband and laptops has held so many students back? I mean, I just can't see how it's a level playing field for students.
Well, it's not a level playing field. So as far as Oasis is concerned, we rolled out iPads to all of our students. We made the biggest order of iPads, we're told, by Apple in educational history, because we wanted to create a level playing field. So our CEOs, our leaders, are working off the same devices. Every child is seeing the same thing. But I'm not just thinking about Oasis here and our schools. I'm thinking about every child in the country. As you say, Susanna, we just do not have a level playing field. I think what Jeff and I agree fundamentally on is that we need a change. The education system needs review. We need certainty for September, before September, in the summer, not halfway through the winter term or at Christmas. But what I'm arguing is, don't waste a pandemic. Out of this crisis, don't waste a good crisis. Let's think beyond next year, and let's start thinking now. And let's do something different that levels up for every young person. Yeah. We don't have that in education.
It's good to talk to you both. Thanks ever so much for joining us for that discussion. Jeff Barton and Steve Chalk.